Since starting off as one of the hottest teams in the NBA, the Washington Wizards have quickly cooled down, which has led many to believe it's time for this team to move on. Between a lack of success despite a ton of talent on the roster, and the fact that Bradley Beal is now voicing his frustrations, it's looking like Beal's time in Washington is coming to an end. But how did we even get to this point? Going into the 2022 NBA season, the Wizards seemed like they finally had the right pieces to win now with Bradley Beal. Sure, the team didn't have an immense amount of star power, but with the new additions in Montrezl Harrell, KCP, Kyle Kuzma, and Spencer Dinwiddie, it seemed like this team was bound to do some damage, right? At first, this take looked to be true, being that the Wizards came out firing on all cylinders and won 11 out of their first 15 games. Sure, a handful of these games were against bad teams, but overall, it looked like the Wizards were finally in a position to win now. But then, things took a turn for the worst. After their first 15 games, more and more losses began to trickle in for the Wizards. Some of which were close games that came down to the last shots, others were games in which the Wizards got blown out by nearly 30 points. Injuries along with health and safety protocols began to plague this team, and at the time of this recording, the Wizards are sitting at the 10th seed in the East, which means they're barely even in the play-in tournament. Lots of people have been pointing to different things to blame the Wizards' midseason struggle, but today I wanted to discuss the three main reasons why I believe the team is having a hard time winning, and why these things will likely lead to Bradley Beal packing his bags and leaving this team sooner rather than later. To put it simply, this Wizards team just isn't good enough to win at the highest level. Sure, they have one star in Bradley Beal, but other than that, this team is half filled with win-now role players and half filled with underdeveloped prospects. It seems like this Wizards team has two completely different types of rosters going on at once, and honestly, it hasn't benefited them one bit. Now, I'm not saying that a team can't have a win-now roster and also have young players. I mean, just look at the Golden State Warriors. This Warriors team is a top seed in the stacked Western Conference, and they have a ton of young talent with potential such as James Wiseman, Moses Moody, and Jonathan Kuminga. The crucial difference with this team is that they don't rely on their young talent. The Warriors are basically running two franchises at once by developing Moody and Kuminga in the G League while winning now with their actual roster. For the Wizards, they have to rely on their young guys to go out there and play, which shows the lack of talent on their roster. Just think about it this way, if you are in a position to win now without even playing your young talent, you have a good roster on your hands. But if the young, inexperienced players on your team are some of your best players, well, you might not have what it takes to win at all. Obviously, there are some exceptions to this around the league, but the point is, the Wizards in my eyes just don't have enough talents on their roster to win at the highest level. Don't get me wrong here, the team has a very solid starting lineup, but when you take a look at the bench of this team, that's where the problems start to rise. If you have watched the Wizards team in the past couple of months, you would know exactly what I'm talking about, because to say the bench of this team is underperforming is an understatement. The role players of this team aren't necessarily the worst names. The Wizards have Aaron Holiday, Neto, and other players as well, but it's more so how the team is trying to use them that has led to their struggle. While coming off the bench, guards like Neto and Holiday have usually been assigned with facilitating for the offense. The only problem is neither of these guys are good facilitators, which leads to a ton of mistakes when the bench unit's on the floor. Neto has been in a playmaking role for a short stint with the Jazz, but that ended in the team waiving him. Other than that, for the rest of his career, he's been a catch-and-shoot type player, yet the Wizards want the man to be dropping dimes and initiating the offense. That's not where it ends though, because let's be realistic here, not all of this is the Wizards' fault. I see countless plays where both Holiday and Neto drive to the rack for a contested layup without even looking for their teammates, and the worst part is, there's usually a ton of time left on the clock. The harsh truth is, neither of these guys are built to be a six-man type guard on a legitimate playoff team. They literally just aren't good enough. And pair that with the fact that the rest of the Wizards bench are basically a bunch of mediocre power forwards, and you can see how this equates to the Wizards having one of the worst benches in the entire NBA. But enough slander on the bench unit, because we have seen teams lacking depth make the playoffs before. What exactly is going on with the starters that has led to this team losing more and more lately? Although there may be a lot of things to blame for the downfall of the Wizards, I believe a lot of it simply comes down to the pace and shot selection for their stars. So far this season, the Wizards have had the slowest pace offense in the entire NBA, with their average possession lasting over 22 seconds. And with the shot clock only being 24 seconds, this means that there are plenty of instances in which this team is putting up horrible shots just to beat the shot clock. What's interesting is that this team does a somewhat decent job moving the ball, at least from what we see. The advanced stats, however, show that this is far from the case. Getting right into the numbers, the Washington Wizards are currently second to last in seconds per touch for the ball, which means when this team passes the ball, their players hold onto it for a long time. This can be traced to a lack of ball movement, which means the players are simply standing around too much and not cutting or running picks enough to get the offense moving. Because of this being the case, the Wizards are one of the slowest offenses in the league, and in my eyes, if they want a chance at winning, they have to pick up the pace. This team has a solid amount of players that can shoot from the perimeter and get a bucket down low in the starting lineup, so there is absolutely no reason why they should be holding on the ball so much and playing ISO ball consistently. What this team needs is quick cuts to the paint or outlet passes to shooters for an open 3-ball, because with the pace at which this team is playing, it is no wonder why they've begun to lag behind. Plain and simple, I believe this Wizards team is facing the harsh truth that they just don't have enough talent to make a playoff run, let alone a championship run, which is why I believe there is a very good chance that Bradley Beal finally demands out from this team and moves on. I feel like the Beal Wizards have run their course, and at this point, most fans on Twitter and other social platforms just want to move on and get a ton of assets for Beal so they can start their rebuild. So with that being said, let's discuss just how much the Wizards could get back for Beal and some potential trades to get the deal done. With the NBA trade deadline approaching, many believe that Bradley Beal could get dealt if things continue to go south for this team, because teams that would be looking to acquire Beal would be very desperate. Although I think it's unlikely the deal goes down at the deadline, I thought it'd be fun to explore the top 5 most likely trade destinations for Beal and some trade packages to go along with them. In my eyes, there are many teams that would likely display interest for Beal, but the top 5 would be the Miami Heat, Denver Nuggets, Philadelphia 76ers, Brooklyn Nets, and the Dallas Mavericks. Now, there are many more teams that would likely throw in an offer for Beal, but for the Wizards and the situation that they are in right now, I believe these 5 teams have the best packages to get Beal. Today I'm only going to be discussing trade packages for 3 of these teams, but if you'd like to see a part 2 of this video, let me know by leaving a like and comment below. And if this video gets a good amount of love, I'll be sure to do it. Starting off with the most likely team in my eyes, we have the Miami Heat, who at the time of this recording are at the top of the Eastern Conference and have made it very clear that they are legit. I just made a video on how deep this Heat roster is, and because of that, they could likely package their young assets to get a star in his prime in Bradley Beal. Keep in mind, this trade only happens if the Miami Heat fall short in the playoffs again this year and are looking to make a huge trade next summer to try and win now. But with that being said, let's get right into the trade package. In this trade, the Miami Heat would send off Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, cap filler, and draft capital if needed in exchange for Beal. This trade would give the Wizards some great young talent to start their rebuild with. Hero is likely a future all-star and is on a very similar timeline of the Wizards' other young players. Duncan is a bit older, but his offensive production would be exactly what this team needs. The Heat would likely have to part with some picks in this trade, which would be the main incentive for the Wizards, but overall, this is a great deal that gets them young talent. On the other side of things, the Heat go all in to win now with their veteran core. Beal alongside Lowry, Butler, and Bam Adebayo would be a nasty starting lineup, and Beal would also provide this team with a much-needed offensive boost, especially down the stretch in games. This trade would give the Heat a couple of seasons to compete at the highest level with their big four, and after Lowry and Butler begin to decline, the team could still build around Bam and Beal for a few seasons after that. As someone who keeps up with the Miami Heat a good amount, this is a must-trade for this team if they struggle in the playoffs this season. But as good as the Beal-Miami trade is, there are other teams that could also offer great packages, one of those being the Denver Nuggets. It's no secret that the Nuggets have been far from what they hoped this season. With injuries plaguing their roster, the only thing keeping this team afloat right now is Nikola Jokic, who is playing like an MVP again this year. Even when healthy, the Nuggets' big 3 of Murray, Porter Jr., and Jokic weren't able to make it all the way to the finals, so there is a good chance this team also cashes in some depth to try and win now with Nikola Jokic. In this trade, the Nuggets would send off Michael Porter Jr., Will Barton, Jeff Green, and cap filler in exchange for Bradley Beal. Keep in mind that there could also be Nuggets picks involved in this trade, especially being that the main piece in this trade for the Wizards has an unknown future with injuries. Despite the huge injury risk with Porter Jr., this trade has huge upside for the Wizards and could set them up with a star for the future. MPJ has expressed wanting a bigger role, and with this Wizards team, he would get just that, and the opportunity to prove everyone wrong. The last trade of this video is the least likely in my opinion, but with Ben Simmons yet to be dealt, I had to include the 76ers in this video. I believe that Simmons is a bit past the timeline of what the Wizards team is trying to do in the instance that they do trade Beal. So for this trade, I got a third team involved that would get the Wizards the young assets they need. In this 3-team trade with the Kings, the Wizards would receive Davion Mitchell, Shake Milton, Marvin Bagley, Damian Jones, and draft capital from either team. The 76ers would receive Bradley Beal, Harrison Barnes, and Buddy Hield, and the Kings would receive Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons. There is a ton to break down here, and although every team in this trade gives up a lot, they also get a huge return. The Wizards get a ton of young talent with potential, but more importantly, picks from the 76ers and Kings to help them rebuild. The 76ers get all the win-now talents in the world with Beal, Barnes, and Hield, and the Kings get Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris to help this team win now without giving up Tyrese Haliburton or De'Aaron Fox. In my eyes, this is a win-win-win trade, but let me know down below what you think. Regardless of the trade package, it is clear that Bradley Beal is getting frustrated with his team and could very well leave sooner rather than later. And all I have to say is that the Wizards better trade him before he demands out, or else they'll get significantly less than what he's worth. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Woods out.